Let's bring in Nick Wagoner. You're listening to D-Lo and KC on KIFM, West Sacramento 98.5 FM, KRXQ HD2 Sacramento, ESPN 1320, always live on the free Odyssey app. Nick, I'm really sorry. We got lost in the most random conversation about Messi performing at Heart Health Park. I don't know how that happened, but appreciate you joining us, my friend.
If I had a nickel for every time I've heard that
one. Well, look, I could ask. Give me a second here as I vamp so I could pull this up. I thought I could find it a little easier, but when we were doing the 50th anniversary of hip hop, and 102.5 put out that question of your
four
favorite,
greatest,
songs. Nick responded. Nick, do you remember what your? Because I'm got so many responses on that I couldn't respond to everybody. But or no, you did respond.
My top four, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I know Ready to Die and the original Blueprint are always on there, right? I think I said something like my other two would be a rotating cast, depending on the day. Man, I think I had the Low End Theory on there.
I think I do remember you having that.
Yeah, and what would be my other one? Illmatic, maybe.
So, wow, that is, I've seen Nick Wagoner with hip hop music blaring through the speakers. That would not have been my guess.
I don't remember. I know there was a few that I always have like kind of a rotating list of like albums that would be like on that cut line, that would be just below that. Like I'm from the St. Louis area, so obviously I have the Country Grammar always has to be at least in the mix, right? And then Food and Liquor, Lupe is always way up there. So like there's a lot. I don't remember off the top of my. I know I had some Outkast on there too. Aquemini I think was on there. So yeah, I mean there's a lot. It's hard to choose. It's like choosing your favorite kid, right?
I've only seen Nick Wagoner dance to Mac Dre, Too Short. So this is a bit surprising to me that we lean so heavy East Coast. I'm all for it. Just a bit surprising. No E40 references in there.
Might had All Eyes on Me on there too. I know that's also real close to the list. That depending on the day. So
anyone on the 49ers today not make the cut? You talking about the cut line there a minute ago. Anyone you're surprised by that didn't make the final roster?
Real quick before we go to I found Nick. Hold on, I found it. You had the Blueprint, Ready to Die, Graduation, and the Low End Theory.
Yes. There you go.
And he also mentioned all the other ones that he just mentioned: the Illmatic, the Equimized, Food and Liquor, Carter 3, Country Grammar, and All Eyes on Me.
There you go. So thank you. I can't believe I forgot Graduation. Yes, the original Kanye trilogy I put up against any trilogy ever. But
that's very fair.
Very fair.
Anyway, I digress. To answer Damien's question, no real surprises. The 49ers are kind of in this weird spot because they have so many injuries. There's a couple of things that they're going to have to do that are just procedural. So you'll see like Kerry Hyder Jr. and Austin Bryant, a couple of defensive linemen who got cut. But we'll be back. They're vested veterans, so they don't have to pass through waivers. There's a couple of guys on the roster right now who are hurt. Looking at like guys like Danny Gray, Ray McLeod, even the kicker Jake Moody that may have to go on short-term IR. So to keep those guys available to come off of IR, they have to go on the roster right now. And then over the next 48 hours, they can maneuver those things around. But otherwise, the only real big move happened on Friday night, guys.
Oh, what was that? I missed it. I've been tuned out.
Yeah, that Messi's got you. That was obviously the big one, the big domino that had to fall, and we all saw what happened there.
So I mean, let's go there. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
It kind of came out of nowhere in one respect, whereas a lot of people thought it was an option. But it sounded as though on Thursday, and maybe this was just posturing, that the 49ers were going to hold on to Trey because they weren't getting the compensation that they were looking for in a potential trade. And then it seems like Jerry Jones just swooped in out of nowhere, wrestling term. That's Jerry Jones's music. He came out of nowhere and said, here's a fourth rounder. Is it that simple how it happened? The Niners were content with keeping him until Jerry Jones came in with the fourth round pick with no conditions on him.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things at play there. First of all, yes, that's correct. And the two answers that kind of give that away. First of all, I don't necessarily think it was just posturing that the Niners thought they were going to end up keeping Trey Lance because they did think that there wasn't going to be an offer good enough. And they were basing that thought on the fact that Trey Lance has essentially been available since March, guys. And, the Niners were never going to just give him away for, say, like a conditional 6th-round pick or a late-round pick swap or something like that. And so they were coming from a place of, well, like, what has changed that would garner us an offer that we would consider for Trey Lance? And I guess what had changed at that point was there were enough teams around the league who had been through a preseason and training camp and got to see, this is what we have at quarterback. Is it good enough? How do we feel? What's our, what does both our short and long-term picture look like at quarterback? And I think the Cowboys were a team that looked at it and said, maybe we don't love our long-term projection, because short-term we know what they have, right? So that was a big part of it. And when they openly admitted that this was more than we expected to get, that was, again, a function of the fact that previous conversations hadn't yielded anything close to what they ended up getting. By no means am I saying they got a great return on this. This is a huge, colossal mistake, and there's no getting around that, and nobody is even denying that at this point. But how that comes back to bite them, we kind of have to wait and see. So that is kind of all the way that played out. And I do think the Niners at certain points, Wednesday and Thursday, thought there was a real chance that Trey was going to end up staying because they weren't going to just give him away. But when it got up to more closer to a mid-round pick than a late-round pick, I think that changed the equation.
Nick, I appreciate the line you throw in that you threw in there when talking about the mistake that this was, but what type of ramifications it'll have, we won't know for a while, because people are really eager to condemn Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch for the move up, the trade, and the draft pick, where Kenny and I have kind of been leaning towards. They've been winning football games, and isn't that like the gist of it? Like you almost have to judge the two things separately. Was the trade up in the draft, did that go south? Yeah, probably. Has it affected the team? At this point, the answer is no. And you're one of the few people who I've heard say, yeah, but you can't judge it yet. You have to wait, because if Brock Purdy is your franchise quarterback, then you're fine. If he's not, well, that's a whole different set of issues.
Totally. It's interesting because John Lynch, I think, used the term a couple of times on Friday night. He said Trey's story is unwritten, which is the idea that, we don't know if Trey is going to be a good player or not yet, but the 49ers simply don't have enough time to find out, right? But the other side of that is the Niners side of this is unwritten, in my opinion. Now, you can sit here and say, yes, they've made the last 2 NFC championship games. I could also flip that argument and say, well, if the 49ers had stayed at number 12, or they had not made the trade up or whatever, we don't know who their quarterback would have been. But what if whoever they had taken with some of those picks was the guy who put them over the top? Let's say was the guy who squeezes the interception that Jaquiski Tartt drops in the NFC Championship game. Do they win the Super Bowl? So that's part of it. The other part of it is, and I think we're already starting to see this roster is still really good. Don't get me wrong, guys. It is a top 3 roster in the league, probably top 2. But the depth has taken a hit. And you see guys leave in the offseason who aren't big stars, but they're really serviceable, good players when injuries inevitably happen. I'm talking about, the Azeez Al-Shires, the Jimmy Wards, the Daniel Brunskills. Ward was a starter, of course, but those guys who have been really valuable players, and they're the middle class of the roster. They're making between $5 and $10 million a year or whatever. So not big money, but not small money either. But that middle class has been squeezed out. So how do you replace those guys? You replace those guys with draft picks. So that's going to be where it starts to get felt as we get here over the next few years, if the 49ers don't continue to hit on draft picks. Now, to their credit, they've hit on a ton of draft picks, particularly in the mid to late round, that have not just been serviceable players, but have been legitimate stars. How long can they keep that up? And that's going to be kind of the calculus that comes into play here on whether this is a trade that comes back to bite them long term or not. And I think as we sit here right now, short term, we're saying no, but long term, it could play a big difference. And then it all comes back to Purdy, right? If Purdy turns into the guy that they think he can be, then that will go a long way in offsetting the size of mistake with Trey Lance here.
And Nick, you broke that down perfectly. I'm one of those guys that's probably looked at as a John Lynch apologist because, I do come from a different point of view when it comes to some of the moves that they've made and things, as opposed to the way that the general public looks at it. But even the way you laid out, hey, you know, what they could have done with the roster if they wouldn't have made those draft picks, those are all still assumptions by everybody. You know what I mean?
Right.
They could have drafted terribly with the next two
Yep.
first-round picks and not added any depth to their team.
Right.
And that's why I say we do know that they've gone to the NFC Championship game. And I always say, or 2 times in the last 2 years, 3 times in the last 4. And I always say with Kyle Shanahan, people get so focused on the process instead of the end results. And even when they look at the process of it all and say, well, he could have done this and done this, I think people hate the fact that for the most part, he's gotten away with it. Like, the process has been terrible, but guess what?
Yeah.
He got away with it. Like they're
that's
NFC Championship team.
That's just it, right, Kenny? Because this is the unique situation wherein everybody looks at this and says, well, if you gave up that much for a quarterback and it didn't work out, everybody's getting fired, because that's what's always happened, right? It happened to Kyle's dad. I mean, like if we want to be real about it, it happened to Kyle's dad in Washington.
Yeah.
And yet we're sitting here and it's not really even a conversation because they have had and I totally agree. Don't get me wrong. I think that winning trumps all. My thing is just that I don't think we know the full answer yet. We've got little pieces of it, but the puzzle hasn't come completely together yet. So absolutely, if they keep winning and if Brock Purdy turns into the guy they think he can be, this will just be a blip on the radar, right? It'll be a speed bump along the way, especially if they win a Super Bowl. But I do think that there's still a lot that needs to be figured out, of like the long-term ramifications of this move. And if Trey Lance turns into a really good player somewhere else, that's another big conversation that would have to be had. But I also would say, if the 49ers really thought Trey Lance was going to become a good player elsewhere, I don't think they would have done this. And so I think maybe that's, they're not going to come out and say that right now, of course, because the kid was a good kid and he gave them everything he had for a couple of years and had a lot of bad injury luck. But I think if they truly in their heart of hearts believed that he could become a good player in this league, a good quarterback in this league, they wouldn't have given him away for a 4th-round pick, and they certainly wouldn't have given away for a 4th-round pick to a rival like the Dallas Cowboys.
Nick, given all of the circumstances surrounding Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo, the quarterback position, all of these different things, is the Super Bowl the only acceptable outcome for this 49ers team?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be, and I think they're open about it, right? They're not denying what the situation is, and they even know. I mean, George Kittle a few weeks ago, I was asking him about this kind of idea of a Super Bowl window, and he volunteered. We have conversations in the locker room about what the cap situation is for our team, because this nucleus, the guys that they have right now who have been kind of the focal points of this team, those guys are not going to be here forever. And it may only be one more year. If you look at some of the numbers, I was actually literally just about an hour ago kind of going through some stuff for a story I'm writing for next week on the idea of the Super Bowl window. Between like 5 guys, their cap numbers jump a combined like $56 million next year. They're already way over the cap, and that's without having a Bosa extension on here. So I say all that to say they got to win. And if they're going to do it with this group, they got to win. Now, there's ways to extend that window. The number one thing would be if Brock Purdy turns into the guy they think he can be, he'd end up being the best bargain in football, hands down, making $1 million and playing like a franchise quarterback, if that happened. But the other thing they could do is, and they have done this, they keep developing stars. They keep finding those guys that we were talking about earlier who become, Pro Bowl, all-pro types of guys and aren't just serviceable starters. And I do think, guys, there is a little bit of that already undercurrent of these young guys who are just knocking on the door of stardom. And I'm talking about Dre Greenlaw, Brandon Ayuk, Talanoa Hufanga, who's already been an all-pro. But if those guys take the next leap, now all of a sudden your window can be a little bit longer, because you can, some of those older guys who are making a bunch of money get phased out, and these younger guys step in, and you keep the train rolling. So there is a path to that. But boy, it's awfully hard to do, especially when you're counting on finding gems so late in the draft like they do.
So the guy that you mentioned, and really this whole thing centers around, if we're talking about, is Brock Purdy. And Nick, you've seen every snap he's ever taken. I'm very confident in him. I think he is the real deal. I think he's going to be about everything that Kyle Shanahan wants him to be and expects him to be. And one of the things about him that is kind of that you can't put your finger on sometimes, and I keep saying this, is when he's out there, and I know he's with the first string guys, first string offensive line, and the skill players as well, and it's preseason. But even last year in the regular season, it just looks the way this offense is supposed to look with him out there.
Yeah.
Like it just looks that, like that's what I believe Kyle Shanahan envisions in a quarterback, envisions in the pace of the offense, hitting guys in stride the right way. It just looks how it's supposed to look. And I think he has that quality to him where he may be he's not the best quarterback, but he's the perfect quarterback for what Kyle wants. And Kyle has found the perfect quarterback for what he wants out of his offense.
Yeah, I mean the evidence is certainly on your side, Casey. I mean, from what we have seen, there's a lot of evidence that he can be that guy and he can be that point guard, right? Where he's just distributing to a bunch of all-stars who can get the job done, and that's where the Niners have invested their money. So that's what they want to do: get the ball out quick, get it in space to Debo and Ayuk and Kittle and McCaffrey, and let them do their thing. And that's fine. I think what's an interesting conversation to have, guys, about Brock Purdy is everyone was so kind of taken aback by his performance last year that nobody really wanted to believe it was real. And I'm sure there's, fans of other teams definitely don't want to believe it's real. But part of that is his draft status. Like he's not, your typical franchise quarterback. He wasn't taken in the first couple of rounds, all that kind of stuff. But I think that when everyone says, well, he's sure to regress this year, and maybe that's true, but even if he only regresses a little bit, that's still going to be really good because at the end of the last year, he was a top 5 quarterback in the league, just in terms of efficiency and numbers, which is what the Niners are asking from him is to be efficient. But the other side of that conversation is what if he gets better? Like, well, he last year coming out of training camp, he was getting a handful of reps every day as the number 3 quarterback. This year, even coming off of the elbow, he probably got 100 times more reps than he did last year or something close to that. And I think there's things that, I took some heat on this for tweeting this a few weeks ago, guys, but I talked to some people in the building, and one of the things they wanted Brock to do better and more this year is know when to escape the pocket and know when to stand in and deliver. They felt like he bailed out a few times too many last year. And people said, well, why would they take away one of his greatest strengths? Because he can make plays off schedule. Well, certainly he can. But they're not trying to take it away. They just wanted to pick and choose. And you know why? There was no quarterback who had a higher QBR in the league over the final stretch of the season once Brock Purdy took over from the pocket than Brock Purdy. And that is the thing Kyle Shanahan values the most. Can you stand in the pocket, get the ball out, get it where it's supposed to go, and quickly to the playmakers on time? And as long as he keeps doing that, he's going to continue to be this team starter for a long period of time.
Nick, we've kept you super long today, and I apologize for that, but we have to ask one more question, and it's
me. I'm long-winded, guys.
Love it. That's what we do. Why isn't this Nick Bosa thing done?
Man, I wish I knew. I really don't. It's crazy, guys, because even as far back as before camp, I was here and it was close. So, I don't know. I don't know if there is, something off in terms of the money. I don't know if it's the structure. I don't know if it's how many years, because Nick Bosa is only 25. So there's a theoretical world in which the Niners are offering him a 5-year deal and he only wants to sign for 3 or 4 so he can get another bite of the apple. So there's so many different things that it could be. I still think it's going to get done, but I don't know when it's going to get done. I wish it would get done soon so I can go play golf without having to worry about my phone going off, But that's just the world we live in right now. So I still think there's no real reason for a huge amount of concern, but I definitely think we're getting to that point where one side or the other is going to have to cave. And if you're asking me to guess which side is going to cave, I'm going to say it's the 49ers because I think they need Nick Bosa a lot more than Nick Bosa needs them at this particular moment in time.
Great stuff, Nick. We appreciate you. I have a feeling Nick is privy to some announcements. He may not know that these announcements are being made this week, but I think we're going to be hearing a lot of Nick Wagoner on ESPN 1320 moving forward.
Yeah,
just my opinion.
Just a hunch. Just a
guess on my part.
I'll have my messy takes ready for next time. I wasn't prepared for that. So.
All right, prepare your takes on Messi and Beyonce, and you'll fit right in.
Oh, I got all kinds of Beyonce takes. I actually met Beyonce and Jay one time in New York. It was I don't know if I've ever been left speechless by a woman's beauty, but man, that might have been the time.
She is stunning. Like when you're around her, it is
stunning,
stunning, but very sweet. Like we had the opportunity to interview her once. She was extraordinary.
There you
go. More.
Absolutely.
I'll ask you after Nick is gone.
Okay.
We've kept him too long.
Yeah, we have. Nick, we appreciate you, man. Thank you. We look forward to talking to you again soon. Hopefully after the Nick Bosa deal is done.
Yes, please.
All right. Sounds good, fellas. See you.
All right.